It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
I want you to graduate from budgeting to creating a true cash flow plan. That's where I am in life. Is I've graduated from budgeting. It's known how to handle my money and get the basics covered. But now I have what's a cash flow and a cash management plan. And I primarily do that through a system of forced scarcity. And you guys know we do podcast on forced scarcity. That is something I talk about constantly. And if you want to know what that means, forced scarcity is the concept that you on purpose, no matter how successful, no matter how big your cash flow is, you go ahead and pay yourself first by putting buckets together for that money to disappear before you even know it's there. And I mean, I'm talking about everything. I mean, you're funding cash reserves automatically. You're funding your retirement plan automatically. You're funding the kids' college education. You're going ahead and that money just magically is just disappearing. And I know I've done it right when I will tell you, probably 3 out of 4 months, I have to go pull money out of savings and put it back into my checking account to pay bills. And you're like, Brian, that sounds ridiculous. And I'm like, no, I feel poor, but that's the purpose.
Yeah,
I feel poor while I'm getting rich in the background. And I would say, if you're doing this right, no pain, no gain. I mean, it really is. If you're not cutting close enough to the bone where you are having to go back and fill up go pull some money from savings. And that's one of the things that's great about doing this forced scarcity. You will have savings to go pull from, is because those other 9 to 10 months, you were able to really fill it up. And now there are months, and a few of you, we have clients that do this, where all of a sudden the checking account has a lot more money in it. And you go, well, wait a minute. If you have those type of situations where your checking account is filling up, then you need to go and stretch out those success moments and probably increase that forced scarcity in your life. Go increase what's going in, and that's what, Bo, I know you've talked about it. You're in that stage in your life where you got a lot of life things going on. You got babies at the house, but yet you're also funding things. I mean, how do you deal with trying to set stretch goals and also just making this all work with the forced scarcity?
Yeah. So what I do personally, then I also encourage all of my clients who are in a similar situation. If you're someone who has some variable income where it varies either quarter to quarter or month to month, I try to think about how I adjust my forced scarcity almost on a monthly basis. So if I know that income's going to be up because of a certain thing that's happening or a certain transaction that takes place, I do make sure that I adjust those pots up. So in the high school wrestling coach example of saving $100 a month, that's a great place to start. But you graduate to a point to where you can do a little more than $100 a month, and you have to keep yourself accountable that you are doing it. One question I have for you, Brian, is you said that, you have all this forced scarcity going on. You set up these like stretch success moments. Have you found that when you do that sort of stuff, you start to feel a lot less guilty about spending money on things like maybe upgrading your automobile or going on a family trip or buying that new iPhone or whatever the case may be? Do you feel like you can kind of let some of the stress of that go because you know that you are filling up the buckets right?
Without a doubt. I mean, this is one of the biggest benefits that you get from structuring a pay yourself first through forced scarcity mentality, is because I think there's a lot of guilt. And this is why I tell people, get out of the poverty mindset. There's nothing wrong with success, but there is this feeling for savers, and they're going to discover a DNA gene that shows, because there's, we all have stories of why am I so different from everybody else in my family that I love saving, that they're going to find that there's a savers gene. But part of a problem, and I guess the side effects of having this savers gene, is that you feel tremendous guilt for not putting money to work. It's that whole balancing act of being a financial miser or being somebody who's really good with money. We have a podcast on that. Go do a search on financial miser. But it is one of those things where if you pay yourself first, that money that's left over, it's yours. And I first remember when I saw this concept, it was reading The Wealthy Barber. Mm-hmm. If you guys haven't read that, reads like a narrative book. It's actually one of the first books I usually recommend when people come to me with college students and say, what should I get my kids to read to really get them excited about saving for the future? The Wealthy Barber is a great baseline book because it's written like a narrative storybook. It's about a barber in the community who giving great advice to people at different stages of their life. And then you can transition to The Millionaire Next Door and other things. But it all goes back to the basic understanding is that it is good to have your money allocated in a way so that you can then feel free spend what is left and know that there's no guilt because you didn't check the box already on everything else.
And another side benefit of doing this is if you do this, because we all know that one of the things that most often happens inside of intimate relationships is infighting about finances. One of the things that's beautiful from a couple standpoint or from like a marriage counseling standpoint is if you do know the forced scarcity is already happening and those boxes are being checked, you don't have to then fight or argue or squabble over what you're spending money on because it's sort of allowed and accounted for.
Bo, before we move on from this subject, what's the guidelines we tell people on how to allocate money? Because a lot of people are saying, this is great. I'm feeling inspired. I'm getting motivated. But how much should I be saving? What's the actual, you've told me where the goal is of 20 to 25 times multiplier of my living expenses, but how much should I be saving of my cash flow?
Sure. So here's a really nice rule of thumb. Take whatever you make as a household right now, your total gross income, and you should be saving 15 to 20% of that for the future. Now, when we say for the future, in our opinion, that's building towards things like financial independence, building towards retirement. If you have a secondary goal, like maybe you want to buy a new car or go on a trip, those are other short intermediate term goals. But in terms of building financial independence, your goal should be 15 to 20% of your gross income. If you want to be a hyper saver, you're somebody who falls into that, financial independence, retire early movement, maybe you even try to stretch that to 25%. If you're doing that and checking those boxes, then it's okay to start funding some of those other things like, improving the car or thinking about saving for a down payment for a new home or going on that trip or even prepaying debt. If you're someone who just doesn't want to have any debt, once you've checked that saving for the future box, you can easily go start tackling that home debt and that sort of thing.
But let me ask you this. Do you get to count? Because I think there's a lot of people when you say save, they get confused between saving like a savings account, like a joint account or an individual account versus a retirement account. Sure. Do you get to count your 401k, your 403bs,
Absolutely.
your Roth IRAs? What goes into that 15 to 20% number?
Absolutely. Anything that you're building up that's going to continue to grow for the future. So that would be like your employer-sponsored retirement plan, whether that's a 401k or a 403b or a simple IRA. Also your Roth IRAs, if you're building up assets there. Any of those accounts that are continuing to grow for the future. And here's something you can do. Your employer match, it does count in the number, but if you really want to stay on the conservative side and really want to kind of hypercharge it, don't even think about what your employer's doing. Because if you have a 3-4% match from your employer and you're already hitting that 20% number, when you add that gravy on top, you're saving 23-24% of your total income. It's pretty remarkable, and it'll grow quickly.
Yeah, that can be a tremendous sweetener to helping you reach those financial goals that much quicker.